Alrighty, so no nostalgic rewind this time. We are talking about a current game that just released a couple weeks ago, and that is Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2. And I'll be honest, I'm a very casual fan of Warhammer. I really don't know too much about the lore. I know a decent amount, but a lot of the finer details I really don't know. I know a decent amount of the factions, but when it comes to, like the Ultramarines and all the sub-factions, I'm not really fully aware, so there is that. My favorite class is the Tyranids. I have Tyranid miniatures that I like to paint. I don't play the game, the tabletop game or anything, but about a year ago, I bought Warhammer Space Marine 1 because it was on sale on Steam for about $2, and I never finished it. I think I got about halfway through, but I found it real interesting. I liked the gameplay. Kind of reminded me of Gears of War a little bit, and I think a lot of people are making the comparison between this new game and Gears of War, which I don't think is bad. But going into Space Marine 2, I saw at least one of the trailers. I didn't look at any spoilers, anything like that, so all of this was fairly brand new to me. And the game takes place 200 years after Space Marine 1. It's still, I guess, not Captain Titus anymore. Now it's Lieutenant Titus. But you can see by the golden bolts on his head that it's been 200 years since each bolt represents 100 years of servitude. And it starts with Titus in the Death Watch trying to summon a bomb, basically, to kill a bunch of Tyranids on a certain planet. But as the game goes on and you're fighting Tyranids, you slowly start realizing that there is a more grand scheme happening in the background. And that is one thing I really liked about the story, is it has a really interesting mystery. And for someone like me who didn't really know all the factions, I didn't get all the details maybe as soon as I could, and so it really felt interesting to try to unsolve or solve this puzzle. And by the end, because at first I was kind of worried it would be very fun to fight Tyranids, but is that going to be the only enemy in the game? And as I've learned, it is not. There is a point, I would say, a little bit past the middle mark, where you start fighting other enemies and you don't fight the Tyranids anymore. Changes the gameplay a tiny bit, since it's more of different enemies that are more focused on range and shooting than just outright coming at you, which the Tyranids in the game can shoot as well, but these new enemies are just slightly different. Another thing I'd like to point out is that in the game, even though you cannot customize anything for Titus, you can get an ability throughout the story, which is basically a fury mode, where it's increased damage, you take less damage. It lasts maybe 10-15 seconds, but it really helps when you're fighting big crowds or bosses. There are times in the game where it switches to a jetpack, and there's a whole new system with a jetpack. In the multiplayer, these are kind of the abilities that you can change depending on your class. So if you're a heavy class, you might get a bubble shield that defends you and anyone else standing in it, or you can get the jetpack where you can fly in the air and then slam to the ground. Every class has something different for you to try. The Tyranid AI in the game is pretty solid. I played it on normal difficulty, and shockingly, just to get kind of the learning curve, it was, I'll be honest, a little difficult when starting. But once you kind of get the hang of it, it's not too bad. But the game mechanics, in essence, are quite simple. It's shoot, aim, melee, parry, and dodge roll. Well, dodge/dodge roll. You click the dodge button once, you kind of strafe away. If you click it again, you'll actually roll. The shooting is, your standard third-person shooter. It does feel very Gears of War-like, only because Gears of War, in my opinion, kind of perfected the cover-based shooter, third-person shooter. But, you know, you go through the tutorial in the beginning, it tells you all of it, and with the parrying system, because you can just normal parry when a blue flash icon comes on. You can parry and kind of auto kill the smaller enemies, or if it's the bigger enemies and you parry them, you can shoot them with your pistol and kind of get like a perfect headshot. But one thing I will say, and I'm sure this will make a lot of people mad, because when I say the gameplay is very simple in essence, and very repetitive, all it means is you do get quite a bit of different weapons, but in my opinion, a lot of them kind of feel the same, and it's more of you're just doing different ways of hack and slash, shoot, parry. But again, on the other hand, you could say every game is like that, you know, which is a very good point. Gears of War is quite literally just aim and shoot. There might be a few puzzles and usually one vehicle section, but so, you know, I'm on both sides here. I feel both. You could say every game does that, but I think this game falls into that category as well. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because this is a great game for me personally, where I wouldn't say I had to turn my brain off, but I could play it and I didn't feel like too much was being asked of me. Again, I'm not saying that the game is super simple or bad. I'm just saying I'm glad that it's a linear, mission-focused hack and slash shooter game. I like that. Now, for some other people, again, they might point out that, you know, it's too repetitive and they're bored or whatever. But I would hope that the story intrigues them enough to want to keep playing. Because, you know, you do fight some crazy enemies. There's the Carnifex Tyranid, the Lictor, the Heretics, and just so much more. And beyond even just the gameplay, again, the story is really good, and there's technically a secondary campaign, which you can play while you're playing the first campaign, but it's highly recommended you play it afterwards, as it may have spoilers for the main story. So basically, during the main campaign, while you're playing as Titus, there is a second squad that does secondary objectives that you don't get to see or anything. But the secondary campaign, you get to play as that squad going through that story. So I found that pretty neat and pretty cool, that there's kind of two perspectives of the same story that you can play. And not even just that, you can pick a class for that secondary campaign, whether it's a heavy or, you know, like a warrior where it's like a bulwark where it's a sword and shield. You can pick your classes, how you look, so you get to kind of use that customized character for that. And with that same customized character, there is a PvP mode where you can go against other players, and it does remind me of Gears of War a lot, but I love it. I love the game mode. It's, you know, team deathmatch, capture the flag, things like that. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's fair, because I'm not good at PvP games. I'll tell you, I usually try to avoid PvP, but in this game, just like with Gears of War, I feel like I somewhat have a chance, and it doesn't feel so broken that, you know, I just don't want to play it. And so, looking through the game, you get one campaign, you get a secondary campaign, you get a PvP mode, customization. As far as I can tell, there's not really like a microtransactions or anything. Everything is in-game currency, so I can appreciate them for doing that. Graphically, it looks amazing. Again, like I said, I like the gameplay. It's just, you know, once you get through the learning curve, the best thing would be to basically turn it on hard and stuff to really hone in those skills. When it comes to weapons, there are different kinds of weapons you can pick up, whether it's a plasma weapon or like an incinerator kind of weapon, your typical, you know, bolt gun, or like a more fast firing bolt gun. There's sniper rifles, charged sniper rifles. So you can kind of go through and kind of change up how you approach a situation. I myself tended to just do the heavy bolt gun as my pistol, the chain sword as my melee, and for my primary weapon, it was just the fastest firing bolt rifle, because as much as I like the sniper rifles, I never particularly felt like there was a time I really needed to snipe, because the heavy bolt gun pistol really has no recoil, and the reticle doesn't, expand out, so I can usually just snipe enemies with that, and it worked pretty fine. But again, realistically, it's all in preference. But I had a really fun time playing the game. I'm now working through the secondary campaign. I'm doing the PvP mode to unlock more cosmetics for my online character. You can pick different factions for your online character, different paints, emblems, armor pieces, a bunch of stuff. So I think the in-game content is there, and there's all kinds of roadmaps, and so I'm glad that the game launched packaged. It didn't feel like something's missing that they took out to sell to us later. I think the main campaign took me 8-9 hours to beat. The secondary campaign, I'm not sure how long that's going to take, but PvP matches are well timed where I don't feel like I'm taking too much time, or it doesn't feel too short. And so far, everyone, I'm playing with, no one's tried to say anything mean or anything, so I honestly would recommend this game, even if you're not a fan of Space Marine. And I say not a fan like you hate it. Obviously, if you hate it, you're not going to buy it, but if you're kind of like a casual fan like myself, I would say definitely get it. It's, it gives me that nostalgic Gears of War feel I had with Gears of War 2 and 3. The kills are brutal. It's fun. I definitely want to try it on a harder difficulty, because on normal, it's just hard enough. And then maybe gets a little too easy. So for sure, turn it on hard for a secondary playthrough. I'm not sure if there's any kind of new game plus mode. I wouldn't think so, because in the campaign, you don't really level up Titus. So I'd be curious to see about that. But that's really all I had. Again, I didn't have a script or anything. I'm just kind of going off my thoughts here. It's a fun game, and it's beautiful. I mean, I'm running a 2060, I think, or 2070 Super, and on that, it looks great. So I can only imagine how awesome it's going to look on more modern hardware. So again, I highly recommend it. I'd say go check it out. And until next time, that's going to be for me. I'm out.